This video is brought to you by America First Insight. Help support the growing conservative movement by becoming a member today. And if you want to support this channel, you can also use the code REAL when becoming a member. Thank you and enjoy the video. As everyone probably knows, we have been covering the 2025 New Jersey governor election very closely because even to this day, there is still a serious possibility that the Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli could actually win. And let's be clear about one thing. I still think that the Democrat candidate Cheryl is a favorite. I think she's favored by a couple points as of now. I still think at the end of the day, it might get very close, which we'll get to in a second, but I still think Democrats do hold on to New Jersey. But the fact that we're even talking about New Jersey this late into October is absolutely pathetic. I mean, guys, this is supposed to be a Democrat state. This is supposed to be a D+20 state. And even in 2024, when Harris, she did underperform by a lot. She won it by what? Not even 6%. It was a pathetic showing. Everybody knows this. But at least that was over 5 points. At least that was D+6. It was still a massive underperformance. But at the bare minimum, you could argue, well, that was a fluke. That was a one-off occurrence. That's it. But right now, the numbers that we're getting out of New Jersey, it's not showing New Jersey to be a fluke in 2024. Now, to be fair, I'm not saying the early vote numbers are even looking that good for the GOP. In some areas, it's not. But some people are making it sound like this is proof that New Jersey is going to swing 25 points to the left or whatever, which I should be clear about. There is a possibility that Mikey Sherrill, she might do a lot better than expected. Sure, that's entirely possible. This is a governor election. She might win by 15 points. That's a possibility. Sure. But based on what we're seeing right now, I don't think it's even likely to occur, if not really possible. I should say not possible, but very unlikely to occur. And we can start by looking at the updated early vote numbers out in New Jersey. And let's be clear about this. The numbers right now, they don't look good. They do not look good for Jack Ciattarelli, at least, not enough to win. There are some areas where you could argue maybe it actually looks kind of good for him to get it within like 5 or whatever. But to win New Jersey, yeah, these numbers right now, it does not seem like enough. As the early in-person voting in New Jersey right now, it's not looking too good. Right now, through day 4 of 9 days of early in-person voting, Democrats are leading by roughly 5,000 votes, roughly D+1.5. That's where they're leading the early in-person voting as of now by. And if I'm being honest, that is not enough for Jack. He has to be winning these early in-person votes, which I should mention, these are only Republicans versus Democrats. We don't know for sure how these people are voting, but you can speculate. Yeah, if you're a registered Republican, you're probably voting for Jack. If you're a registered Democrat, you're probably voting for Cheryl. More than likely, though. We'll get to that in a second. But if you do the math, yeah, it's roughly a 5 to 6 point underperformance compared to 2024 in the early voting in general, including mail-in votes and early in person. It's roughly a 5 to 6 point swing compared to 2024, which you do the basic math, a 5 to 6 point shift would mean that Cheryl wins the state by 11 or 12 points. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're just saying, well, it's a 5-point shift. It's over for Jack. There's no way he could win. And again, I gotta be clear about this. The numbers I don't think are enough for him to win. I think you gotta have a plurality of Republicans, early in-person voting at least, to have a chance. You cannot be down by 5,000. And theoretically, based on history, the next couple of days of early in-person voting, it gets a bit better for Dems. Though maybe history changes and, it's a complete opposite. Most of the time, though, it actually gets more Democrat over time. So that's why right now, I don't think it's enough for him to win. But at the same time, I'm not seeing this magical D+25 victory for Cheryl or whatever. There's some people pushing some crazy stuff. Could she win by a decent margin, like 10 or 15 points? Absolutely. That's entirely possible with the current state of turnout in New Jersey. Fine, whatever. But right now, even the early voting metrics, which I said don't look the best for Ciattarelli, the more you look at it, the more context you add to the early voting right now, you begin to realize that, hey, wait a minute, this is not as bad as some people claim it is. Now, I'm not saying it's good either, but it's not this D plus 25 victory. It's a tsunami, some people were saying. No, not really. Because while it is true that the early voting is more Democrat than 2024, that is not the case for 2021. Yeah, when Jack lost by 3 and he came very close to winning, in fact, he overperformed Trump by a couple points. Guess what? The early voting was like 10 or 11 points more Democrat than is right now. So it's kind of a weird situation where, yeah, it's more Democrat compared to 24, but at the same time, it's far more Republican than 2021. Even 2022 was even more Democrat. So it's like a 15 or 20 point shift or something crazy like that. And when you factor in historical trends, yeah, the early voting in New Jersey right now is looking to be like 5 to 7 points more Democrat than 2024, but potentially up to 15 points more Republican than 2021 when Jack lost by 3. Now, does this prove he's going to win? No. But it adds a bit more context where, yeah, he's doing worse than Trump in 24, but compared to 21, he is doing far better in the early vote, which I know that was with COVID. I understand that. But it adds a bit more context where, yes, it is more Democrat than 2024, but compared to the same election in 21, it's much more Republican. Just look at the early voting. Look at Michael Perusa's data. You can look it up yourself. It's there. The early voting was far more Democrat. And I know back in 2021, you had COVID, blah, blah, blah. I get that. But still, it's not as bad as it seems. But on top of all of this, there is one thing that, for whatever reason, not a single person wants to mention. The fact is, Jack Ciattarelli is going to do much better with independents and even Democrat voters compared to Trump. This is something that no one is bringing up, which is crazy because this is kind of a big deal happening in New Jersey. For those that don't know, there's a bunch of unions, organizations, groups, lawmakers, whatever. They're all Democrats, and a bunch of them, they are endorsing Jack Ciattarelli for the first time ever. A lot of these groups, like the Jewish voters in Lakewood or whatever, a very large Jewish community, like 50,000 voters or whatever, it's a lot of votes, they supported Phil Murphy back in 21. Now, they support Jack Ciattarelli. There's a bunch of these other big unions as well. They supported Murphy back then, now they support Jack. And a lot of these voters, they're Democrats. Or they're others, they're independents. You get what I'm saying? A lot of these voters that are going to vote for Jack, they're probably not registered Republicans. A lot of them probably are Democrats. And you can actually confirm this in the polling. There's been a bunch of polls released, and you look at the current polling average is D+3. But go in the individual polls. Quantus Insights, they have independents breaking for Ciattarelli by a big margin. Coefficient, same deal. Trafalgar, same deal. Only Rutgers has it going Cheryl. Even like Dickinson and Bad Pollster, they have Jack winning the independents by like 1. So he is doing very good with independent voters. The majority of these polls actually have him winning them by like 10 or 11. And he's winning a sizable chunk of Democrat voters. Well, a lot of these voters, they're registered Democrat or independent. Maybe, and this, I'm not saying like this is what's for sure gonna happen, but maybe a lot of these voters that are voting early in person, they're going to vote for Jack. A lot of these voters, they're registered Democrats, but they are 100% supporting Jack Ciattarelli. That's entirely possible because a lot of organizations and these unions in New Jersey, they're backing Ciattarelli, and they have a big ground game. And a lot of these voters, they probably voted early in person last year or whatever, and they're still Democrats. You see what I'm saying? He's more than likely going to do much better with independents and even Democrat voters. Maybe not enough to win, but it really balances out this underperformance with Republican voters, which you can argue the only reason that Republicans are underperforming like by a decent margin It's not that they're not voting. In fact, you compare the rates compared to like 21 and 24 is kind of similar. The problem is Democrats, they're just getting their people to vote at way higher rates. But it makes you really wonder, are these voters like Jewish voters in Lakewood that are going to vote for Jack by a big margin? Are these Union Democrats? Who are they? I'm not saying that's for sure what's going on, but it's entirely possible, and everybody's kind of just forgot about this. That a lot of these voters, they're Democrats, especially New Jersey, and they're not Republicans. They have not registered to vote Republican, but they're going to vote for Jack Ciattarelli. Is it enough to win? Maybe not, but it might explain what's going on here a little bit. And you look more at the polling like from Quintus Insights, they do great polls. Look at this. Those that are voting early in person, they're breaking for Ciattarelli by a point. Is it enough to win? I don't know. But they're breaking for him by 1. And still, a plurality of voters, roughly 50%, they're voting on election day. And Jack is winning them by a big margin. But the problem is, we don't know if that's enough to win. But you do the math, even with the early in-person voting looking a bit more Democrat, the polls actually indicate he might win these voters. And if that happens, that kind of confirms that a chunk of these Democrats or even independents, these are the voters that are going to vote for Jack Ciattarelli. These are the union voters, that are supporting him because the unions are endorsing him. Maybe it's the Jewish voters in Lakewood or whatever. We don't know. So I'm going to say right now that Cheryl's the favorite by a couple of points, but not by 25 points. Could she win by a big margin? Absolutely. That's entirely possible. It is New Jersey. It is an off-year election. Crazy stuff can happen. But at the same time, is it as bad as some people claim it is? No. When you add more context to it, it's not good. I'm not saying it's going to be good at all, but compared to 21, it is actually better. And with these other voters, we don't really know who they are. These might be silent Ciattarelli voters. These might be voters that are not Republicans, but they're voting for Jack for whatever reason. And funny enough, this same Quintus Insights poll, they asked a question about who they think their neighbors are voting for, and a majority of voters said Jack Ciattarelli. They said, yeah, regardless of who you personally support, who you think most of your neighbors, friends, or coworkers will vote for. And a majority said Jack Ciattarelli. And he's winning unaffiliated voters, winning independents. The top line was like D+3, like Cheryl +3 or whatever. But this question was R+6. And the same question is actually usually a very accurate measure. Is it perfect? No. But back in 2020, this same question was used a lot, and it predicted Trump's margin in a lot of these states much better. And he's winning a majority of unaffiliated independents, even a quarter of Democrats. We'll see what happens. Anything could happen, I guess. But if you're Jack Ciattarelli, you still want to get higher early in-person voting. You don't want to lose this margin. Even if you're winning them at the end of the day, you still want a plurality Republican electorate, at least in early in-person voting. That's the only way you have a really strong chance of winning. If you don't get those voters out, you could still win because, like I said, there's a lot of these silent Jack voters that exist. They do exist. They're supporting him for whatever reason. But is it enough to carry him over the hump? I don't know. But anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.